Now, as I explained in the opener of the show, we have a journey ahead of us economically that's starting to look like a scene out of the Perfect Storm movie that would actually make anyone seasick if they understood the magnitude of these numbers. These are some big, scary numbers crashing onto us by our economists, and yet we have the window wipers full noise to keep steady to navigate these waves. But do we have the right captain at the helm? Joining us now to break this down from his corner is ACT leader David Seymour. David, what do you make of the large numbers out of the budget and our ability to be able to pay this back?
Oh, look, I think from the point of view of fiscal sustainability, it's a disaster. And we once had a finance minister, Ruth Richardson, who called deficits fiscal child abuse. Just to give people a sense of it, the government has just committed to borrow about $20,000 for every single person, including newborns to the elderly, $20,000 each. And the interest on that is going to be about $1,500 a year. So you take a family of five, you're going to have a $7,500 interest bill on the debt that the government has taken on each and every year. It's that serious.
Yeah, but David, at the same time, a lot of New Zealanders won't physically feel that pain because, as James Shaw said, we have a very narrow tax take in this country, and that tax increase will be felt by the minor majority of voters.
Well, that's right. So it's certainly not the case that your newborn baby is going to be paying tax, but they will throughout their lifetime. And it's also true that the more you work, the more you invest, the harder the tax regime that we have hits you. So this has been a budget that has taken existing spending, carried on business as usual, taken new spending and thrown a lot of cash around it. Things like new ferries, for instance, across Cook Strait. Whether that's a priority right now, I think some people might ask the question. And then it's spent an enormous amount of money, including $20 billion currently unallocated, which conveniently is able to be allocated before the election. So I think we can be extremely critical of a government that has thrown fiscal discipline out the window and has put a huge encumbrance on productive people that's actually going to last decades by the time we get back on top of this current scourge.
Now, David, you've been a part of Simon's response committee meetings, quite a lot of them, and particularly around trade and the economy. Our major food exporters are calling for some seriously big improvements in terms of our leadership in trade. What were you left with feeling after sitting through a lot of those committee meetings?
Look, I think what the government should have done is got onto what its role is. For any project in life, you've got to work out what's my job, what are my objectives and KPIs, and what do I need to do to achieve it. I would say the government's job is to do really good public health so that we can be free to move around in and out of the country, have smart borders without being locked down and having the economy crushed. Secondly, it should be doing really good rules of the game so that it's clear that people are able to do those things, with certainty over time so they can plan their future. And third, we should be looking to reach out to our friends around the world and open up our network so we can have as big a shared bubble as quickly as possible. That's the kind of strategic leadership that I think was needed to get the economy going again. And for the rural sector, I have to say it's been fascinating the way the attitude towards the sector's changed. So when I grew up, it was the backbone of the economy. And then for the last decade, it's been the whipping boy of the country. And all of a sudden, people recognize the value of being a net food producer, both for getting fed and getting export receipts. But what's critical is that the next government actually makes the changes around climate change, around water, around the RMA, so that it's not just rhetoric, and we actually do value the rural sector and makes it easier for the rural sector to contribute to the recovery.
Oh, we've got some changes on the Fish and Game Council too that will help, David. So there's a lot of positivity, but you know the resilience of rural New Zealand. We know how that we're loved underneath it all, and it's sad that a crisis has had to happen for that. Now, talking about this election going into it, is really is one out of the box. Are you surprised that Todd put his hand up before Tuesday?
Oh, look, I don't often agree with Jacinda Ardern, but she's got one thing right, which is that it's not really helpful for one politician to comment on another party's internal troubles. Look, they'll sort it out, who knows? I know that the rural sector needs a less encumbered, less muted voice in favour of free trade, property rights, and environmental policy that is a bit more disciplined and a bit less punishing. And actors can point to having a good track record on offering that. So look, I don't know. Todd will sort it out. Simon will sort it out. Whichever one they pick. But I'm just interested in what the overall outcome, what the flavour of government we can get out of the election is.
I understand, and your seat may be safe, David, but in terms of ACT actually being at the table in the election, I know that you strategically want to see some dramatic improvement in those polling rates because, as I said in the opening, rural New Zealand only have one other option, and it's to vote New Zealand first because it's our insurance policy to ensure that the Red and Greens actually listen to what's provincial New Zealand. So, of course, that's where a lot of your swing vote can come from politically. I know you're interested in what's going on right now.
Well, I think people need to ask about the insurance they got, because one of the things about buying insurance is they're very happy to do the sales pitch and take your money. But once it comes time to claim, you find there's a lot of fine print that you didn't quite notice at the time. And that's been very much the case with this so-called New Zealand First insurance strategy. You look at ETS, you look at water regulations, you look at RMA reform, and indirectly related to the rural sector, you look at firearms. You haven't got much payout on that insurance policy you got, did you?
It's certainly starting to get into the swing of campaigning, David. It's absolutely great. And so in passing, the primary sector needs to be heard and have the freedom to get on with the job. How can ACT help sort of strip away some of this bureaucracy that they've faced over the last 3 years?
Well, I think you've got to go back to defining what the problem is. So, yes, there's an issue with water quality, but actually it's here in Auckland because the Auckland Council has consents to omit
and water supply.
Yep. Yeah, well, that's another thing. We don't need to make this all about Auckland problems, but we got to get some equality on water quality because it's unfair what's being put on the rural sector. This Resource Management Act, the government just passed legislation so that its projects don't have to go through the RMA. So at least now they admit it's a problem, but they're going to leave everybody else encumbered with the yoke of it. And these kinds of things, science-based, evidence-based policy, RMA reform, property rights, free trade, these are bedrock ACT policies. And our proposition is that if those are concerns of yours, then you could do better than adding a few more fearless ACT voices as opposed to someone else who may not have been entirely true to their word so far.
Who are you looking forward to that's coming up through the ranks in ACT?
Well, you look at Beth Holbrook. I mean, she's been a sheep and beef farmer, mother of two, award-winning businesswoman, and she's been loyal to the party through tough times. And now it looks like on the current polling, she'd easily be a member of Parliament. I can think of much worse people to have in Parliament speaking on behalf of the rural sector than her.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, ACT leader David Seymour.
This is Sarah's Country.